stick fight breaks out in Australia. No one died, but if it had happened in the United States, could things have been worse? I'm Yasmin Khan with The Breakdown, and this video is kind of amusing when you first look at it. It's a couple of dudes down under fighting with sticks. It doesn't get much better than that. By the end of the altercation, both men walk away from the scene relatively unscathed. Sure, they both had picked up weapons with which they either intended to protect themselves or harm the other, or maybe both, but they were sticks. There's only so much damage that one can do with a stick. Even if you wanted to cause extensive damage to someone with a stick, you'd really have to work at it. So what if, instead of a stick being the closest weapon within reach for either of these men, they had guns strapped to their belts? We could have seen a very different outcome, and that very different outcome is one that we are all too familiar with here in the United States. People's tempers will inevitably flare. People will inevitably clash with one another, and people will inevitably act in ways and say things that they know they ought not to. Each moment of misstep shouldn't present a life-threatening situation, but that is exactly what happens when life-threatening weapons are just laying around.
When 9/11 happened, we didn't ban planes. We secured the cockpit.
And I know what the pro-gun people are going to say. The bad guys will always have guns around no matter what I say here in this video, and the anti-gun libs will always be the ones left defenseless. And sure, to that I will say that this is more a matter of minimizing risk. It doesn't have to be all or nothing, and for the record, I'm not anti-gun. I live in Texas, and honestly, I can't even imagine an anti-gun future. I am pro-gun control, though, which I think is a sensible response to a problem that is a problem. The first step to minimizing excessive gun violence and gun deaths in the United States is acknowledging that the amount of gun violence and gun deaths that we see here is, in fact, excessive. One of the unfortunate truths about the way governments and leadership organizations function is that often risks aren't treated with much deference until the consequences of ignoring those risks actually comes to pass. For that reason, a lot of whistleblowers and just more risk-averse people can come across as dramatic and hypochondriacal chicken littles. And yeah, you have to be somewhat forgiving in risk assessment. Risk will always exist, and simply put, no one wants to live that bubble boy life. We will never achieve a way of life that is completely devoid of risk. Still, it's hard to argue with the data that shows repeatedly and consistently that the lack of gun control in this particular country is directly correlated to the amount of gun-related incidences that we see. The gun control advocates aren't talking about probable outcomes of what might happen if we don't do something about gun control. The sky has already fallen. We've already seen unfathomable gun violence, so much so that we're practically numb to it now. We've seen elementary schools shot up. We've seen active shooters at military bases, movie theaters, concert venues, nightclubs, places of worship. We've even seen a few cases recently where small children have shot their teachers. Why did those children have access to guns? Still, we fight an uphill battle when the goalpost is constantly being moved regarding what tragedy is tragic enough for our officials to do something about it. While many gun control advocates at least attempt to make reasonable and measured arguments for their cause, providing data and stats to support their arguments in the interest of protecting our people, including or especially our children, last year, Lauren Boebert reminded us that following 9/11, quote, "we didn't ban planes." That's what we're up against. And no, Lauren, we didn't ban planes because that would have been unreasonable to do, but we did enact additional safety protocols in response. You may not agree with the response, but at least we responded. We tried something because the idea of that incident being replicated was too big of a risk to ignore. All right, that is it for me. If you got anything out of this, please like and subscribe, and be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok.